Victoria has fired Billy after the fire that pretty much demolished the underground this week on YNR that Dina sort of inadvertently caused. Join us on this week's Restless Wrap.
You're tuning into the destination for TV superfan discussion, AFTERBUZZ TV. And now, let the buzz begin.
Hey everybody, I'm Rachel Goodman, and thank you for joining in for this week's Restless Wrap. I say this every week, but every week it just keeps getting crazier and crazier. This week we had a fire. So let me just tell you where you can find me first, and then we'll dig in and start talking about all this. So you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Rach Goodman, or on Facebook at Rachel Ann Goodman. We also have a Restless Wrap group at Restless Wrap on Facebook. So please head over there, like it, follow. I'm always going to post the links to the show. So if you want an easy way to be able to find us every week, that's a good way to do it. So, all right, let's dig in here because we have a lot to cover. I really want to talk about the fire first, and in the chat, that's kind of what we've been discussing, but I feel like it would be kind of doing a, it wouldn't be doing it justice to dive into the fire right this second because we have a lot of things that sort of lead up to the fire. So let's kind of start with everything that's happening at Brash and Sassy and Jabot. And then we'll kind of work our way around and get back to the fire. And there's a couple other things we need to talk about too that were pretty major this week. But let's start with Brash and Sassy. So first of all, Victoria, who, as we knew from not last week but the week before, she had been in the hospital. So we start off this week with her basically saying, nope, I am not going to stay in the hospital. I'm leaving. She doesn't even wait for the doctors to tell her she can go. She literally unplugs herself and walks out of there and walks right over to Brash and Sassy, which I thought was, pretty interesting in and of itself. But she ends up getting this really pretty bad call. It's basically the FDA telling her that they're going to do a thorough inspection. They want to see if any of our other products are being poisoned, what the situation is with that, and it doesn't really look good for Brash and Sassy. There's a lot of issues, and it just kind of is starting to seem like Victoria is going to end up having to maybe, well, as she kind of runs through her options, one option I guess she kind of thought about was bankruptcy with the company. Another is kind of has to do with that bridge loan with the Winters Group or the Hamilton Winters Group, where basically they, Neil seemed to be a lot more supportive of what was going on with Victoria, but Devon wasn't having it at all. He basically said that he expected Victoria to pay back that bridge loan as they had planned, whereas Victoria was basically asking for a second loan because she, I guess, needed that to kind of stall. But Devon really wasn't having that. So, and I kind of see where Devon's coming from with that because she already took out one loan, and I don't know how much time that they're actually saying has passed because it didn't seem like, I thought a lot of this had happened right after the 4th of July time frame, and I don't know what the schedule was like in terms of when Victoria was supposed to pay back that entire loan, but you would think that she'd have to pay it in increments and that it wouldn't have just been one lump sum of her paying the entire loan back. But I'm not an accountant and I don't own my own business, so I'm not exactly sure how that works. If you guys in the chat understand that a little bit better than I do, please feel free to include some of your comments. That didn't ring especially true to me because it didn't sound like they would just suddenly, without any mention of it at all until this point, oh yeah, P.S., your bridge loan, the one that you borrowed from us, yeah, you got to pay us back like next week, the whole entire thing. It didn't sound right to me. So we have some comments in the chat. So, and a lot of them are about the fire, so we will definitely get there. And we have some comments about Mariah and Sharon and that scene. That was amazing. Yes, we will get there too. We can probably talk about that next because there's a lot of important information important things that happened with that. Aaron Brody says, I felt so sorry for Victoria this week. She just can't get a break from all these setbacks at Brash and Sassy. And that's true. It's like, first she had to deal with Kane, and then everything with the financial situation where she couldn't afford to pay the rent even, and now the bridge loan, and now with the poisonous mask and all her products being bad. Yeah, it's just, she was not getting a break. So we kind of dealt with everything with the bridge loan with Devon, who pretty much put a stop to that, which sort of left Victoria in this really hard place because now she's not going to get a break. Oh, and also basically Devon said, I think Victoria had said something like, oh, well, you know, you can just buy my portion out of Brash and Sassy if I'm not able to pay you guys back, right? And Devon goes, no, I have no interest in having a cosmetic line. If you can't make this loan payment back, basically, I'm just going to sell off your shares to some random bidder. So there was no way Victoria just wanted her company to have that happen. She's, if it's anything that is very obvious, she's not in it for the money. She's in it because this is her pride and joy. This is what one of the things she lives for, even to a point where Victor had to take her out to lunch and say, hey, you were sick, spend some time with your children. So that's how much this company means to her. So she wasn't just going to let some, you know, bidder come in and take it. We also, while we're dealing with everything with Victoria, we kind of get into them on the other side of things. Victoria and Billy are trying to figure out, well, especially Victoria, they're trying to figure out who poisoned the mask in the first place or what happened. And everyone is throwing blame at Jack and Gloria because of Gloria doing this before. It just seemed like to me the very obvious answer would have been Gloria. And so it was too obvious that it was not the answer. So I knew it wasn't her. And just, you could tell from the way they were playing it too, especially Jack. Yeah, he did not. Jack seems like the kind of person who, when he does something wrong, he won't, maybe he would lie, but you can kind of tell sort of when he is lying. And he seems like the kind of person who generally has a good heart. And so when he's, at least at this point in the game, and so when he was saying, no, I didn't do it, he was telling people close to him that he did not do this. So it seemed very believable. So I didn't think it was Jack either. And all that Ashley, so the other thing that confused me is that when Ashley went to approach Gloria and they were talking about this, and finally Gloria admitted that she had gone in and stole the mask from Brash and Sassy, which made her look very guilty at first. But again, it was one of those things where it was too obvious that she would have been the one to do it. And Ashley basically just ends up taking the mask and taking it back for testing. The way they were acting, though, the way Ashley was acting, was that they were going to actually figure out who poisoned the mask and get to the bottom of it. That didn't make sense to me because I could kind of understand what they were testing it for, to see maybe the specifics of how it had been tampered with. But how was she going to find out who did it? And I didn't think that just from testing it that was going to be the answer. And I was a little confused with everything with Gloria. Obviously, the only thing she really did wrong was go in and steal the mask in the first place. But then did Ashley taking the mask and testing it when she wasn't supposed to have it, wasn't she worried that someone was going to think, oh, well, wait a minute, did Ashley come in and steal this so she could test it? That I was a little confused with, but it didn't seem like that's the angle they were going, because at one point, I think Ashley went over to Billy and said, yeah, we're testing this. Don't worry, we're going to get to the bottom of it. So the other thing is that now that we know who actually did it, and this is kind of jumping ahead a little bit, I'm curious why Billy was even trying so hard to figure out who it was in the first place, unless he was doing it to try and clear his name, if he knew all along that it had been his carelessness that caused this. Because that's the other thing, is that when Ashley got the test back from running, when she got the results back from running that test, she basically found that, first of all, that the damage could have been irreparable to what it had done to Victoria. But then the other thing is that all she could really determine was that it had just been done recklessly, and that was the problem. It wasn't so much that someone had gone in and specifically tried to poison anything, it's just that they had been it had been processed in a manner that was very careless. So I didn't exactly catch on to what they were hinting at in that scene. My husband and I thought when Ashley was telling this to Billy that basically they were hinting that it was Victor and that he was the one who went in and was very careless about this. Not that Victor does things carelessly, but it just seemed to be that that's what they were hinting at. We do have some comments. So Simone Francois says, I feel bad for Vicky too. She was poisoned, humiliated, and now she might lose everything. Doolaman says, no, she wanted to partner with him. He was like, hell no. I knew it wasn't Gloria. Aaron Brody says, I thought it was Gloria because she has a history of tampering with products. Ice Woman, I thought that it might have been Phyllis. And that's what I thought, because there was definitely a scene where Phyllis went into that laboratory and we didn't see her actually doing anything, but she was walking around looking at things. And that's why that's where I thought they were going with this. So that's why when it turned out it was actually Billy, I was a little confused, because maybe if I went back and rewatched the episodes with him leading up to this, it would be clearer, but it didn't seem to me that he was the one who did this. He seems to really care about Brash and Sassy too, but they were in a rush, and that does sound like something that he would do, even if he didn't mean to poison them. Doolaman says, no idea it was Billy. Taylor Jones, I feel so bad for poor Vic. Aaron, I thought maybe Kane did it. That would have made sense too, because of everything, of course. And Kane had been in there enough times. Ralph Lawrence says, Juliet will be bleeding this week. Could be leaving the show. Huh, interesting. I didn't know that. Aaron says, then I thought it was Victor next so he could ride in as the hero. That would have made sense. These are all very obvious choices for who could have been behind all this. Simone says it should surprise no one that Billy's reckless behavior hurt someone, and that I definitely agree with. Taylor, Billy is being so reckless, it's awful. Ralph Lawrence says Newman could be over if Victor doesn't stop Zack, and that is another thing. We'll definitely get to that, because it all seems to kind of be wrapping up in a way that might lead us down that path, since Victor is going to now take Brash and Sassy. Hubby Joe says he cares so much that he risked cutting corners to save the company. Instead, he buried the company more. Yeah. Aaron, I was so shocked when Victoria said that the person was Billy. Yeah, I agree. Definitely. So let's kind of get into the sex ring then, and then we can kind of work our way into Tessa and Mariah and everything happening with that. And then we'll kind of work our way into Lily, Maddie, Reed, and get into the fire. So, okay, the sex ring. At this point, we kind of saw a little bit with Sharon and Scott, and obviously Scott knows that Zack is the one behind all of this. I'm glad that he realized it, because it would have been a little frustrating to me if Scott was still kind of confused, because at this point, yeah, he hasn't seen Zack do anything, but it's very obvious. And I think the tension's really good too right now, because Scott doesn't have any obvious proof. It's pretty much just what he's saying. And I love that Sharon is backing him and that people care about him enough and believe him enough to trust him without questioning him. But it's great tension with Abby, because when Scott tries to tell her, hey, this guy, I'm actually worried about you, Abby she loves Zack, of course, so she's gonna defend her boyfriend, and here's this guy who's just stepping in, and she doesn't have a great relationship with Scott anyway, but now he's stepping in, trying to tell her to stay away from this guy that she really cares about. Of course she's not gonna believe Scott, especially with how they fight and how they really kind of don't seem to like each other, really. Doolaman, Scott shouldn't have let on that he knows to Zack. I agree with you 100%. That's a problem I had with the way that Scott was handling this. He's not being very smart. First of all, he shouldn't have been talking about the sex ring so openly with Zack. I get that he would have told Sharon everything. That I understand. And people that are super close to him, I could understand Scott saying, yeah, I'm writing this expose on the sex ring. But he was being really stupid to tell Zack, someone that he doesn't know that well, what he was doing, number one. Number two, the fact that he would go up to Zack now that he knows and tell him that he knows and threaten him and basically make, try to put him in his place. And then the fact that he would go to Abby too, I think was stupid, because he should have realized Abby's not going to believe him. I understand what Scott's trying to do, and I think it's great that he's trying to help her, but I just think he's being kind of dumb about it. And he said in the beginning of this week that Scott was watching the way that Zack and Abby were, and he was watching Zack's body language, and he was watching how he was talking to Abby, and he even made a comment that this guy Zack is really good at what he does. So why would he think for a second that he'd be able to convince Abby, who's gonna believe Zack because one, she loves him, and two, Zack is a really good con artist. So Scott should have rethought that. I think it's gonna come to really hurt him that he went about it this way instead of just kind of sneaking around. He already let the cat out of the bag a little too much that he's gonna do this. So I think Zack was still going to try to get this guy. But now that Zack knows that Scott knows, it's going to be even worse. Doolittle says, stupid. I agree. Hubby Joe, Scott should know better and not tell Zack anything. Aaron, Scotty is so stupid. He told Sharon not to confront him, but then he confronted him. Now he'll probably skip town. Yeah, either he'll skip town or Zack's going to do something even worse. Because let's face it, Zack is pretty resourceful. He'll figure out a way. I mean, he already tricked Scott into setting him up for murder. He's going to do a lot worse. Ralph Lauren, it was Abby who told Zack about the article. Sometimes she talks too much. Yeah, that's true too. But Scott's not helping his situation either. Aaron, right, Abby. Abby needs to shut up too. Stop telling company secrets. I agree with you there. Taylor says Abby should probably stop. Hubby Joe, Abby is getting really annoying. Yeah, and that's the thing. When I was watching this, this is kind of when Abby first came up to, Abby was with Zack, and she came up to Scott and Sharon, and Abby basically said it flat out, like, I've heard rumors about you, Scott. Something about you and a prostitute. Why would you say that? This is a guy, let's remember this history here. So before this, when Abby was going through some things with everything happening with Ashley and Dina, and how Abby had just discovered she wasn't truly an Abbott, at least not by blood, and Scott was there for her. He even hugged her. I understand they have their moments when they fight, but why would you just go up to someone like that in the middle of a public place with your boyfriend who may not know the rumor and start talking about company rumors that you don't even know are true? That was annoying. And I know they wrote it in because they wanted to cause that tension between the four of them, because obviously Scott is now on to Zack, but it didn't seem like it just kind of made Abby look bad that she would do that in the first place. Dooliman, did they ever explain how Tessa knew Zack? Yes, they did. So what they said, and this is when Tessa came in to Crimson Lights and she was talking to Sharon, and Sharon ends up telling Tessa everything that's going on, which I liked. I'm glad. I know that Scott didn't really want her talking, but she told Tessa. So then Tessa ends up explaining to Sharon what the history is. Basically, Tessa and Zack grew up in this really bad part of town, and Zack had this intimate massage parlor, as Tessa put it, and he pretty much convinced her and it sounds like kind of threatened Tessa too to work for him, plus she needed the money. And she said that Zack made Tessa walk around in like skimpy outfits and do things that were very awkward, and it sounds like there was some, sex going on there too, even though Tessa claims she didn't actually have sex with anyone. But that's the history. We finally learned it. I'm really glad we did. But now that we know that history, my question is, the sex ring comes into town and Tessa's sister is involved. How did Tessa not think of Zack as a possible culprit here, considering what we now know, that Zack was running this really strange massage parlor where it was kind of like, you know, certain things were happening that aren't usual. So if I had been Tessa, especially growing up from a harsh background, I probably would have been wondering about Zack much earlier on, because it couldn't be a coincidence that her sister and Zack and the sex ring come in all around the same time. So no, to me, Tessa should have known. She's too smart to not have figured that one out. Aaron says, yeah, they said Tessa knew Zack from Chicago when Tessa worked for Zack in a sex massage parlor. Yeah, exactly. Ralph Lauren says they need to bring Billy into this storyline because Scott is Lauren's son and Billy is Lauren's nephew, because Lauren and Jill are sisters. Billy needs to save his other family, not just Abbott's. That would be interesting. Yeah, I'd be really curious to see what that would look like. Taylor, I'm literally still in shock from this week. So good. It was a really good week. So that's kind of where we're left with the sex ring. And the other stupid thing is that Scott, he approached Zack a couple times and not only told him that he knew, but then he wouldn't just quit. Then they just kept, like, you know, he kept cornering him. And then Zack finally approaches Scott, and this is where Abby comes into the picture. And so Scott should have known better, that if he was going to tell Abby, she was going to run and tell Zack. So right in front of all of them, it's Abby, Zack, and Scott. Abby starts talking, of course, saying, hey, Zack, by the way, Scott doesn't think that I should trust you, and he doesn't think you're good enough for me. So now that's out of the bag, that Scott was trying to help Abby, so it just makes it even worse, because we don't really know if Zack cares about Abby, what the situation is. Obviously, he's bad. There's no doubt in my mind about that. But in a sick way, Zack could believe that he loves Abby. So now, on top of this guy, Scott, saying that he knows that Zack is part of the sex ring, on top of him running his mouth saying he's going to do this expose, now there's a third thing, and maybe Zack, on top of all of this, feels threatened because maybe Scott's going to come in and try to take Abby, because even if Scott doesn't think that that's his, you know, game plan here, it's probably looking like that a little bit to Zack. And Zack's already accused Scott of, you know, hey, if you didn't have a girlfriend, I would think you were trying to steal mine. So I think that's Scott's just going to piss Zack off in too many ways right now. So, okay. The other thing I think we should definitely mention here is that awkward conversation with Victor and Zack. That was another thing. A couple months ago, I think, when, or maybe it was just like a month or two, when Abby brought Zack over to meet her father, and they had this, you know, sort of weird, awkward meeting, and Victor couldn't pick up on the fact that something was up with Zack. That didn't ring true to me, because Victor seems like the kind of guy, like, he's gonna figure these things out. You can't con a con man, because he'll know. So I thought Victor was going to read through the lines on that very, very quickly, and he didn't, and he kind of sort of seemed to like him. I mean, he did give him the whole, if you hurt my daughter, I will kill you talk, but didn't seem like he really figured out that Zack was up to no good or anything about him. Even if it wasn't a sex ring situation, I feel like Victor should have read the guy better. Yeah, Doolaman says, Victor knows everything. Exactly! You can't fool Victor. That's one thing I'm convinced of. I'm not a huge Victor fan, but if it's one person you don't want to piss off, it's him. And if it's one person you're not going to fool, it's Victor. So when Victor approached Zack at the coffee shop, I thought Victor was finally going to tell him, hey, I can sense you're not up to anything that's going to, you know, be too great. And instead, all Victor really said was, hey, Zack, I saw your car, you know, overnight at Abby's a couple of times this week. If you hurt her, First, this was hilarious the way Victor put this. First, he said, "Should you hurt Abby when she is done hurting you? Because I know she will. Then, only then, you will have to deal with me." I loved how he put that. It was amazing, but at the same time, I thought he would have picked up on more. But Zack did legitimately seem scared. So I don't know what Zack's up to. It's not only that, unless the whole thing is because Zack is trying to get to Victor, then it makes sense to me. But if that's not his goal, then I don't understand what he's doing with Abby, if other than the fact that he does care for her in some sick, messed up way. But I'm leaning more toward the fact that it's all about Victor, and Zack's trying to get in with Victor somehow, so that he can, I don't know, keep doing what he's doing. Ralph Lawrence says Victor is worried about his family, but not Newman, and Zack slipped through the cracks. Yeah, that is true, especially with everything happening this week and the last couple of weeks. I could understand that. Hubby Joe says, Team Jack. Yeah, me too. Team Jack all the way. Aaron says, I don't understand Zack at all. If he wanted Scotty not to post an article on the sex ring, why not just kill him? Why kill Natalia? That's a really good point. And also, that is one thing I forgot to mention, that Zack made a threat like, if you post that article on the sex expose, or if you do your expose on the sex ring, it will be the last thing you ever write. Zack just doesn't seem like he has that kind of, I mean, he does, like, he should have just, if he was that worried, yeah, he should have just killed Scott. Why Natalia? Natalia didn't seem to be much of a threat, first of all. I know what he was trying to do by killing her, making it look like Scott, but I would have thought that if Scott was being charged, that's another thing I don't understand, is how Scott got off the hook with that. Because in any other circumstance, if someone's being charged for murder, like, you would think, I don't think he's being charged for murder. I think they said they let him off on like a smaller charge. But if you wake up, if a guy wakes up dead next to if a guy wakes up next to a dead body, you would think that he would be considered a suspect for the murder, number one. Number two, that he'd still be in jail until they figured everything out. So that doesn't ring true to me. Number three, they didn't make it, in my opinion, they didn't make it clear enough why Scott got out in the first place. But you're right. Why kill Natalia if Zack didn't want this expose to be done? Why not just kill Scott? Or if you're not going to kill him, kidnap him. That's kind of what I thought they were going to do originally when they drugged him, not set him up for murder. Doolaman, Sheila needs to come to Genoa City, especially now that Scott is there. Aaron says, exactly, Doolaman. And then Taylor says, exactly, Aaron. Doolaman, good point. Hubby Joe, no murder weapon, no charge. And okay, I get that. But they should have, I don't even think they mentioned that. I think they just said, oh yeah, we're letting him go on like a smaller charge. And then they just let him walk out. And I think they said that eventually there is going to be a trial for the whole situation, but something's not adding up to me anyway. It feels like a major plot hole. So that is kind of covering everything with the sex ring. Let's talk about Tessa and Mariah, because that's a huge chunk and is kind of related, not really, but sort of, to everything that's going on with the sex ring. So this was our Halloween week. So we have Tessa, Mariah, Devon, Noah. They're all going to Crimson Lights for Halloween. In fact, all the Newmans seem to be going to Crimson Lights for Halloween. And the entire Genoa City seemed to be going to Crimson Lights, which I thought was interesting considering, well, I've never heard of people going to a coffee shop for Halloween, but okay, fine. People are going to a coffee shop. So they meet up and they're in costume, and it's very awkward between Mariah and Tessa, but Tessa and, I don't know, Mariah seems to have come to the point where she's trying to make it work to have this friendship with Tessa really hard, even though she cares about her and loves her and doesn't see her as a friend. She's trying, but she's still really confused. And so Mariah even says, hey, let's do Girls Week. Tessa saying she can't because she's going with Noah. They're going away together. And it's getting to be too much for Mariah. She's trying, but she just can't. So then she ends up going back to her house because she's not gonna, or she goes back to the ranch because she knows she's not gonna be able to handle clubbing. So she just kind of, you know, acts like she's sick. Well, doesn't even really act, just says, yeah, I'm sick, I'm leaving. Sharon knows something's up. I mean, obviously Tessa knows something's up too, but Sharon is starting to really get that something's going on. So this is the scene, and I know a lot of us were talking about this in the chat earlier too. This scene, Sharon ends up going back because Scott met Faith, and then that's when they all ended up going to Crimson Lights, and then basically Scott was like, well, no, I don't want to, you know, Nick didn't really like the fact that Scott met Faith, and Scott kind of understood because he was sort of putting them all at risk being involved with the sex ring and everything. So Sharon ends up just going home, and that's when she runs into Mariah, who is clearly not sick. So this whole situation, Mariah starts getting into how she's pretending and how she is putting on this act, and basically like she's the one who cracks jokes, the one who basically doesn't really talk about her feelings. And she starts to get into it too about how, you know, being with a cult, she was kind of taught, okay, no, like I can't discuss my feelings. I should be very closed off kind of. And Sharon seems a little confused at this point and doesn't really know where it's coming from. And she keeps trying to figure out what's wrong if Mariah is having a problem with Devon. And that's where Sharon thinks this is that it's probably she's having boyfriend issues again. Well, as Mariah basically starts to explain, it's not really boyfriend issues because Devon is a great man for her. And she very much stressed the words man. And I kind of knew in this moment that that's where this was going, is that she was going to tell Sharon the truth about everything. And I love how when Mariah finally did tell Sharon, first of all, I love Sharon's comment about how she would have a PhD in relationships. And I'm like, well, you probably have not heard this one yet because of, you know, everything with Tessa dating Noah and just, you know, I just thought it was funny that Sharon would make that comment. So basically Mariah ends up telling her that there's someone that she feels really deeply about, and Sharon goes, who's the guy? And Tessa goes, no, it's a she. And Sharon was so supportive. It was amazing. So shout out to Sharon for that. She deserves an applause for how supportive and wonderful she was to Mariah in that moment. And even though Mariah hasn't lived with Sharon her entire life, Sharon in that moment alone, Sharon deserves an award for how supportive she was being. And yeah, I feel like Sharon could have maybe done a little bit more in terms of, you know, not pushing so much about Devon, but it's probably because Sharon didn't realize what was happening here. So her support was amazing. And the fact that Mariah even said, or Sharon even said something like, you thought I would have a problem with you being attracted to females? And Mariah said, no, that's not where my head's at all. And that's when Mariah finally tells Sharon that it's Tessa. And the only issue Sharon has with it is that it's Tessa who's dating Noah, her brother. And Noah, Sharon gets into how much it's going to hurt Noah. And yeah, that's a very legitimate concern. And I feel bad for Noah, so I understand. But then Mariah goes on and basically says that she never wanted to feel this way for Tessa. She didn't want this at all. She wanted Noah to be happy. And Mariah makes a really good point, is that sometimes in life, in her situation, you can't tell yourself who you're going to love. You can't tell yourself who you're going to be attracted to or love or want to be with. It just happens. And so Mariah was just being very earnest, and it was such a beautiful moment. One of my favorite that's ever happened on the show for sure. And in the end, Sharon says, well, Mariah, you should just be yourself and you should tell Tessa how you feel. So let's go over to the chat and take some of the comments here. And we have a lot of people saying that Cameron deserves an Emmy. Aaron says, oh, this is about before. Aaron says, yeah, they said that Scott could still be charged. He's out on bail. Cool, that's good to know. Juleman says, give Cameron the Emmy. Taylor Jones, Cameron deserves that Emmy. Yeah, what a powerful performance. Aaron Brody says, Mariah was the actress of the week for me. I went through so many tissues during her scenes. Yeah, for real. Mariah, Cameron, that was an amazing performance. I think that my favorite I've ever seen on the show. Cameron, I think, is my favorite actress on the show for sure. And Mariah, I think, is one of my favorite characters. Duleman says exactly at Aaron Brody. Ralph Lauren says, Jordan and Phyllis will hook up this week. I think that's a prediction, so we will get back to that. Ice Woman, during this scene, Sharon couldn't win. Hubby Joe says, Team Sharon. Taylor says, yes, loves Sharon so much. Aaron, I love how Sharon was so supportive when Mariah came out to her. Yes, exactly. And it just, it made me like Sharon's character even more. Taylor says, I'm excited for the emotion when Mariah tells Noah. Yeah, I agree. It's going to be so heartbreaking, though, because poor Noah. Aaron says, when Mariah said she wasn't feeling well, I thought she was pregnant. Oh, that would have been interesting, and that would have been even more confusing for her, considering everything happening. I'm glad she's not, just because I feel like that would probably add more to the confusion and to the tension and the hurt and the pain that she's dealing with right now. Not because of a baby, but just because it would be even more to deal with on top of everything else that's happening. Duleman, Noah can't catch a break in love. Yeah, that's a definite. I feel bad for him, but at the same time, especially once we get to the next scene where Mariah does confront Tessa, now I feel bad for Noah, but not just because of how Mariah feels, but I feel like Tessa shouldn't be with Noah either. I don't feel like it's fair to Noah that Tessa is still trying to be with him and trying to pretend like that's what she really wants. Okay, Mariah goes back to Crimson Lights to talk to Tessa after pretty much everyone is gone. And she starts with, there's something I need to do. And Mariah just gets right to the chase. She starts talking about the kiss and basically says, that kiss meant something to me and we need to talk about it. And Tessa says, well, we did talk about it. Mariah says, no, we lied about it. And I thought that was an incredibly powerful line. And basically, it was wonderful to see Mariah opening up like that, how emotional she was too, how she was bearing her heart. And Mariah is someone who can't easily do that after everything she's been through in her life. So to see her being able to do this was very powerful. But it frustrated me with how Tessa was reacting, even though I understand, Tessa has every right to say that she just wants to be friends. She does. But I still was kind of frustrated because Tessa wasn't saying that she didn't care for Mariah. She was saying the opposite. She was saying the kiss did mean something to her, that she didn't say the words, but it kind of was implied that she did love Mariah in a non-friendship kind of way, but that there's things about Tessa's past that Mariah doesn't know, that Tessa doesn't want to get into. And basically Tessa says, I can't be anything more than a friend with you. We need to leave it at that. And Mariah says, well, I want you in my life too, but not like this. And that's it. She leaves. And I understand where Tessa's coming from, but here's the thing. If you can't let Mariah, she should be able to let Mariah in. They've been through so much together. Mariah has not shown Tessa anything but love, kindness, and Mariah has given Tessa every reason to trust her. So I don't understand why she doesn't. I know it's harder because Mariah's the one she loves, and that's why maybe she wouldn't want to be with her over Noah. But it's not fair to Noah that she's doing this to him, that Tessa's doing this to him, number one. Number two, if Tessa can't be with Mariah because of her past, then she shouldn't be able to be with Noah either. And that's really, I feel like that's really hurtful to Mariah because it's sort of, I don't know, like it's not exactly, I wouldn't say double standard, but it's more like, okay, so you can be with someone when you can be with Noah even though you have this crazy past, but you can't be with Mariah with this crazy past. That, I didn't like that. So I felt really bad for Mariah. I feel bad for her in general. Aaron says Devon and Noah could be really hot together. and Doolittle says the writers have such a handle on exactly who the character of Mariah is. Yes, they do. Ice Woman says Thursday's episode was the best of the week. I loved Thursdays. Taylor Jones, the writing of Mariah is amazing. Doolittle, she's one of the most real, authentic soap characters ever. Simone says, I was just happy Mariah's being honest, and even if she does not end up with Tessa, she should live her truth anyway. I agree, and here's the thing with Mariah. She made it very clear that, yeah, okay, she loves Tessa, but she obviously is attracted to women, and she should be dating women. She shouldn't be dating men, and I think that I agree with Simone completely. Even if things don't work out with Tessa, at least Mariah is being honest to herself now, and she's no longer walking around living a lie, and at least she's told Sharon, someone she's really close with, that she can now be herself around, and it will help her with taking one step closer toward being herself. So, all right, we are running out of time here, so let's hit on the fire really fast and then get to our law moment. Okay, so everything happening with the twins. Oh my goodness. So basically, first of all, I loved a lot of the moments with Kane and the twins. I loved how they were sort of coming around. And I actually, in the past, I really didn't like Kane. But this week, I did like Kane. I started to kind of forgive him for everything. I don't know how you guys felt, but yeah, after this week, I think I might like Kane a lot more than I did before. But basically, they have this party that Kane agrees to. And for some reason, Maddie and Maddie more or less was kind of starting to think that the party was lame. I didn't get that because it was just about them hanging out. What were they going to do differently anywhere else? But in any case, Reed seemed to think that they could go somewhere else. So they tell Kane they're going to Crimson Lights. But that's not the real goal. The real goal is, I guess, Reed wanted to go to the underground. I'm assuming because he wanted to drink with the rest of the party, maybe. Not sure if that was the end goal because it never got that far. But basically, they end up in the underground after Noah gives Reed the key, and basically it's a situation where they hear Nick come in because he's all pissed off because of everything happening with Victor, who has said basically he's going out. Victor basically was trying to, one-up Nick again with his business and what he's trying to do. So Nick is all pissed off. Nick goes into the underground, lights a jack-o'-lantern, and then starts lighting matches. Now, this is what I don't understand. So at the end of all of this, Nick didn't seem to understand how the fire could have been started. Obviously, Nick didn't start the fire. He was just randomly lighting a jack-o'-lantern. But I think that he should have remembered, it didn't happen that long ago. He probably should have remembered that he lit this thing in the first place. So when it came back to him that, oh, there's a fire at your place, maybe he could have guessed that it had something to do with that. But no, it was actually, so Nick leaves. Dina gets into the bar, I guess because the twins had unlocked the door when they had the key from Noah. But why did Dina go there? That's my question. Of all the places, why? Like, I could see her going maybe to, like, Jabot or somewhere else where she's been before, but I guess she goes to the underground. It just seemed random that of all time she would go there. So, of course, it's it's kind of definitely Dina's fault. The fire starts, and the place starts to burn, and at first, it's Maddie, Charlie, and Reed. They're all in that back room because they didn't want to be seen. They pretty quickly realize there's a fire because they can't breathe. And then after all that happens, it's pretty much just a matter of they kind of get trapped in there, and then Billy comes in and saves them. And I don't understand how he was able to open the door when the twins couldn't open the door before. I know at first they didn't want to because it was going to basically they thought it could cause an explosion. But Billy comes in, and pretty much the only reason why they lived is because of Billy saving them. And then Billy and Jack end up having this really wonderful brotherly moment, and then at the end of the day, everyone is saved. So I know I just sped that up really quickly, but we're kind of running out of time, so let's hit our law moment really fast. As you guys can see up on the screen, I have Kane, and that was when Reed was actually hugging, well, no, sorry, let me scratch that. That was when Charlie was hugging a girl, and that was Kane's reaction, and it was hilarious. So pretty much that is my law moment, plus Kane's reaction to watching the Halloween movie once the kids leave. The only other thing that I'm going to say about the law moment is that it's funny that Scott is basically saying that kids don't like him and he tells this whole story about how like there was Batgirl when this girl dressed up as Batgirl when he was a kid and he was mean to her and she never talked to him again, and that's why he does not kids don't like him, and he doesn't like Halloween because of Batgirl. And then the last thing I'm gonna say about my law moment is that when Jack is about to run into the building and try to save Billy, which I didn't understand. I also didn't understand why a firefighter would allow that in the first place. When he's about to run in, he has a few words with Victor, and Victor says, "Our battle won't end tonight, not like this." Definite law moment. Okay, so I think I covered all the law moments. I covered most of what I wanted to catch. I did not get to everything because there was just so much this week. I'm sorry we kind of had to skim through right around the ending. So I'm just going to hit predictions real fast.
Your AfterBuzz TV predictions.
So we have, okay, the big thing I didn't get to say too is that Victoria fires Billy after she finds out he's the one who caused the poisonous mask. Didn't think that would be him. So I kind of think that Billy's going to go back with Jabot now that he's sort of kind of patched things up with Jack. And then it definitely sounds like Victoria is going with her father. And he's going to take over Brash and Sassy, even though he's going to let her continue working with it. We have people saying, Juliman says JT is coming back. Awesome. And on top of that, I kind of think that maybe we're going to maybe see Scott finally get something happen to him from Zack because he's being a little foolish. And then I'm curious to see what happens with Reed and Maddie now, because clearly Lily agrees that Maddie and Reed should not be together, which that stinks. I feel so bad for them. So, because they were just being a couple of stupid teenagers, and now they're probably not going to be allowed to see each other. So, that about wraps up our show for tonight. Thank you guys again in the chat for joining. I'm, sorry we had to skim through the very last portion. My name again is Rachel Goodman. You can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Rach Goodman, or on Facebook at Rachel Ann Goodman. You can also check out our Facebook page at Restless Rap. I'll always post the shows on there. Thank you so much for joining. It's been a crazy week. Until next week, we'll be back again 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Thank you guys again for joining the show. Have a great week.
From executive producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire AfterBuzz TV staff, we would like to thank you for listening to the AfterBuzz TV network. To watch or listen to other after shows and post comments or questions, be sure to visit AfterBuzzTV.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of AfterBuzz TV.
Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.